All righty. It is 7:07. We can get started. Welcome, everyone. This is the March 27th meeting of the Greenwich Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. Our first item is, well, called to order, which you just did, seating of alternates. We have a full house today, so alternates will not be seated, but please feel free to comment and participate. Next item is review and approval of the draft minutes of February 27th, 2017. Has everyone received a copy of the minutes and had the opportunity to review them? Yeah. Are there any comments or questions on the draft minutes? No? Okay. May I have a motion, please?
To approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Elliot seconds. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. Next is the director's report. Pat, if you would, please.
Thank you. So just for the benefit of those who were not at the meeting to discuss the potential of moving our schedule to 2 meetings a month, I do thank everybody, even those who weren't in attendance, did submit comments, and it was all very helpful. And the consulting community was also quite generous with their thinking on it. In the end, it was the consensus was to keep our schedule as is, meaning the 1 meeting a month, and then retain the cone room on reserve for that second Monday. So in light of that, you note we've got an abundance of applications submitted for receipt this evening. We will be going through those and see if we can sort out how complex they are, if there's any agent approvals in there, and then determine as soon as we can if a second meeting would be recommended for April. So we'll try to get that information to you as soon as possible. And then if you could just pencil in June. I did have a pre-application that looked like it was going to be going to a public hearing. So we just would expecting us to receive it in May so that the public hearing would open in June. We are on our way to get the layer of all the digitized wetland information that we get with every application. If you recall, I think several months ago, I informed the agency that we're about 6 years behind on that, and it's really helpful information for the public as well as for staff in the office to answer questions at the counter. It's terrific to be able to pop in an address and have that great pink area come up and know with confidence what we're speaking to people about. We are also going to be moving from our on-base system over to something else that IT says our on-base is actually quite vulnerable from a security perspective, and they're very uncomfortable with that. So we're going to have to make some changes, which is too bad because I think we're all pretty comfortable with it. So far, we have 3 people who have responded positively to Lindsay's request for the vernal pool survey. So we'll keep going with that one. Slow start, perhaps. And then I am scheduled to give a presentation on Wednesday to the Greenwich Rotary. So looking forward to meeting with those people and hopefully answering questions they may have. And I think they titled my presentation something like "What's in My Backyard?" So I'm not exactly sure what they're looking for, but they're going to get what they get.
Pat, would there be the opportunity to engage the high school in the vernal pool survey?
I think at this point, given the workload that we've got, I don't know that we would have enough work to really make meaningful work of somebody's time.
Okay, very good.
But I'm sure we're going to be shooting for another senior intern as per usual. That's all I have. Okay,
thank you very much. Next up is the compliance report. Doreen, please.
Thank you. I've passed out the quarterly review that will cover January, February, and March, so you have that in front of you. A summary of the green sheet submissions for the months show that of 136 received, 4 required a permit. 28 of the green sheets had wetlands on site, but they didn't require a permit. These are projects that typically involve minimal disturbance or they're well set back from the wetland. For incoming applications, in the month of January, we received 11, 17 in February, and 21 this March, totaling 49 over the 3 months. Approximately 17 of those, or 35%, were submitted, are eligible for agent approval. A breakdown of the bonds, we had 41 requested and 15 were initiated by staff. 29 were eligible for release. A majority of the reason for bonds not being released were because conditions were not completed as per the permit requirements, or the ground wasn't stable prior to the winter months. Regarding the total number of inspections for the 3 months, we've got a total of 214. The deadline set by the agency, we had one Wrenwood Manor that missed the deadlines for submitting a revised planting plan, providing an estimate for the installed cost of the plantings, and submitting the bond. The matter has been referred to the law department. Since then, we've had several back and forths with the property owner, and we did receive a revised planting plan and a demarcation plan, so we're excited, and hopefully we will move forward with correcting this violation. All the other deadlines have been met. We had 3 violations during the month of March. 3 Carriage Road, 327 Riversville Road, and 8 Sioux Place, and that will be discussed on the violation section of the agenda. Other violations issued over the past 3 months have either been addressed by the submission of an application or a permit's been issued. One violation, an application submission deadline is in April. And finally, the total number of individuals served during the public counter hours over the past 3 months totaled over 645.
Excellent.
Excuse me, Doreen? Does that mean 645 individual interactions? Some of those people may have come back a second time?
Each time they do come back, we ask them to sign in. Rarely, on occasion, people don't sign in. So probably there's more than that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, it is 7:15. Seeing as there's no other business, we'll move on to the public session. First, we have 4 consent approvals this evening: 2016-179 44 Mary Lane, 2017-012 630 Lake Avenue, 2017-013 363 Riversville Road, and finally 2017-037 52 and 56 Locust Road. Are there any agency questions or comments on any of those 4 applications? Is there any public questions or comments on any of those applications? Seeing none? Please.
Bob, there was on the last paragraph on the first page, there was a comment about the,
Which one?
an additional, this is Mary Lane, an additional condition prohibiting placement of fill in the flood zone if the revised HEC-RAS analysis shows it will result in more than a 1/10 of a foot rise. Has that been resolved, or do we need to add that?
The information has been submitted, but we haven't gotten the response from DPW that it's solves what they had. So yes, we should add that condition.
So I guess with that condition,
Would you like to make the motion?
I would make a motion to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Bill seconds. All in favor? Okay. Thank you very much. New applications for review. I'm sorry, no, pending applications. First up is 2016-172, 21 Leah Fail Way, Coastal Construction Corp. for Naden, Florida Family Trust for construction of a single-family residence, porch, pool, patio, septic, driveway, drainage, grading, and landscaping 35 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausy, if you would, please.
All right. Agencies looked at this 2 times, and the plan has been changed since the last time the agency looked at it. We've also gotten additional information based on the request of the agency. There was a question about a historic overlay zone, and this was not so much about the zoning status of the property, but about what might have to happen to the existing house on the property. The applicant has told us that the existing house is going to be converted to a zoning-compliant accessory structure. The historic overlay zone no longer needs to be applied for, and looking at the plan, the entirety of this house is beyond the edge of the upland review area. So any site disturbance that might be associated with conversion to this accessory structure can be well controlled by standard erosion controls, and it's well removed from the wetland, and it's, outside our standard review area. The driveway that runs to the south of the house and services 16 Leofale Way is going to be maintained. The loop that came around to the motor court of the existing house at 21 Leofale Way, which had previously been proposed to be eliminated, is no longer being proposed to be removed. So there's no need to get consent from the abutting property owner. And there are some other information about this that's attached to the staff report in a letter from Attorney John Hegney. Let's see, the drainage design has been further revised, and DPW now finds it to be acceptable. So all the outstanding conditions have been addressed. As I previously stated, I think the wetland and buffer restoration plan is an acceptable resolution of a clearing violation that occurred on the site last fall. And I would recommend that there be a deadline set for implementing this plan. Let's see, and yes, and that's included in the recommended conditions of approval. So I recommend the agency issue a permit. I would note that we received a letter today from a neighbor regarding the restoration plan, and pointing out that a report that was done on the property characterized the trees that were removed during the clearing violation as basically consisting of a variety of mature trees: white oak, black oak, red oak, shagbark hickory, red maple, hemlock, sweet gum, and understory dogwood, mountain laurel, and rhododendron. Not that all of these were removed, and I would also note that the clearing was done 50 or more feet from the wetland, and we're focusing on restoring the area of the wetland. I don't know what the applicant has in mind for landscaping the property after they redevelop it, but this is a good list of trees to consider using in those upland areas. The party who provided this information is here tonight and may want to speak on this, but I'll conclude my comments now. I think the agency can issue a permit on this.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Does anyone from the applicant wish to speak?
Good evening, Bill Kenny, William Penn Associates, for the applicant. We are in agreement with the proposed conditions. Bob did forward me the comments from the neighbor regarding the trees that were identified back in '93 or whatever. Those are great native trees. I would like the opportunity to work with Bob or staff on the selection, because a good majority of those trees are for higher and drier areas, and not necessarily appropriate for in the wetland or immediately adjacent to the wetland. So we can certainly use some of those in the buffer, but some of the other trees, so just like some flexibility to work that out with staff.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any agency questions for Mr. Kenny regarding this application on this? Okay, thank you. Are there public questions or comments? Yes, please, come.
A number of people are supposed to be here but have problems with travel and babysitters.
Okay.
But a neighbor has raised a question about the existing driveway that leads to the house and also is shared to lead to the adjacent property. I believe at some point in deliberation, somebody asked the question, could that driveway be removed to allow for more drainage? And I believe the answer was no. That driveway is, I guess you would say it's a gravel driveway at the moment, it's basically mud. But does that have to, for drainage reasons, remain that way? Is there any possibility anybody would be allowed to hardtop it?
I don't know,
Make it an impervious surface?
I think it would depend upon what the drainage calculations for the project would be, but
Okay, but if that happened, they'd have to come back to you for approval? Is that correct?
refer that question to staff.
My understanding is that we may soon get an application for redevelopment of the adjacent property,
Yes.
and so that would be part and parcel of that. In that case, probably they would need I think they do have an easement from the owner of 21 to access 16 across 21, so that, you know, if they want to hard top it, it would depend on the drainage calculations, sure. We'd take that into account.
And the extent to which the development of the adjacent lot has potential wetland impacts, we would or would not see that application. It may just, okay, then we would be considering that application as well.
And as for the matter of the trees, just if you all have been to Leofdale, you know this is not a suburban subdivision. It's basically a little piece of the forest plopped down in Coscom. And people are drawn to it because their houses fit it in here and there between trees and boulders. And it's a little weird, but that's why the people in Leofdale like it, you know, keep Leofdale weird. And the fact that that area, that part of the property was forested for countless memories, so the most we can do to preserve that would be appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public questions or comments on this application? No? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Stefan seconds. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay, 2016-180, 249 Bedford Road, I understand is being continued.
Correct.
Okay, is there any questions or comments to the contrary? Okay, so moving on to new applications for review. 2017-018, 155 Parsonage Road, Mita Vyas for restoration plantings 5 feet from wetlands. Doreen, please.
Thank you. Okay, this was there was a very, very large tree near the house that broke, and it damaged many other trees adjacent to a wetland. In total, 8 trees were removed, and 2 of them were described as being already dead. There was no arborist report, and the work was said to have been completed by the homeowner's landscaper. So all in all, the 8 trees were removed. 3 of them were determined to be dead. The owner did alert us to the work proactively, and felt that the trees were a hazard and was concerned for her 3-year-old child. So they removed the trees prior to getting authorization through the Wetlands Agency. The homeowner's proposing 5 native trees, 1.5-inch caliper. No species was given. Staff recommends that the trees be replaced 2 to 1. So 10 trees, 1.5 to 2-inch caliper with the species located in the proximate location of where the trees were removed. Additionally, the homeowners are here tonight. I know that they're asking for relief for the triple filing fee, so they're here and they'll discuss that with you. Otherwise, staff recommends issuing an order with the conditions that were provided in the report.
Thank you. Please, you can come.
I want to first say that we're delighted to be in front of you, and I thought that you can use an introduction since you've been doing this kind of goals.
Would you mind speaking
Yeah.
into the microphone, please?
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
there you go. Should be a switch on top there.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Okay. No? Okay. Okay. Good evening. I'm happy to be here because I've lived in Greenwich since 1998. Actually, I've lived here before that, but I bought the house in 98. And I thought you should know something about us because it's the first time we've come to meet you. Miss Doreen Collins has been incredibly helpful to us, and we're very grateful for that. But my background is that I went to MIT. I'm a chemical engineer. I went to Columbia to get an MBA. And then I spent almost 20 years in corporate America. And after I felt financially stable, I decided to give my life to a better cause. And so I was asked to come and run the World Wildlife Fund in India. It was the largest nature conservation group there, and people in India knew that I loved nature and conservation, and I didn't want to go back to help industry. I wanted to go back to save the environment. So I went as the CEO of WWF India. I literally rented my house on Parsonage Road, picked back 2 suitcases, and left. And it's the largest NGO there for conservation. It has 30 offices, and it was in some trouble, so I helped to fix it. And then my family lives here. My parents lived in Texas. My brother lives in New York. And so I wanted to come back, and I happened to meet the CEO of the Audubon Society on a fundraising trip. And I mentioned to him I'd like to come back and do the same kind of work here. And he said, well, I don't have the company, I don't have an Audubon for you to run because I'm in that job, but I have a division that's really could use some guidance. And it was the Ocean Conservation Division. It's the Living Oceans Program. And so I came back to run that. And as you know, that's something that's difficult because who has the jurisdiction? Does the state have the jurisdiction? Does the national office have the jurisdiction? At any rate, that was also in a bit of trouble, and we organized that and decided to give it to make it a state jurisdiction. And so after that, I decided that it might be nice to do something that combines both the nonprofit aesthetic as well as the profit skill that I have. And so I decided to move to what I do now. My husband is also in the same business. We are developing drugs against viral medications, and I'm the CFO of the company. And we are against viruses, sorry. And we're developing against the flu, herpes, and so on. He is also a chemical engineer from IIT Bombay and a PhD from Rice University, and so I think we're both like-minded people. The reason I spent a minute telling you this is that I'm very, very committed to the environment. I bought this house because 30%, 1/3 of it is wetlands. And most people don't buy that kind of a house in Greenwich. 50% of the property is either upland or wetland. And I just love the trees. You can see from the photos, if you've looked at the application, it's abundant with trees. And we never cut a tree. We never, even when they were dead, we didn't cut them. But what happened this time in the winter was that the large maple tree fell, a very large tree. And luckily, it did not fall on the house, or it would have hurt us. But it fell on a forward, sort of the southeast corner. And it took out several trees. Now, it's possible I could have done nothing. I could have just let the big trees sit there, the dead trees, the broken tangling branches sit there and let it go, and I wouldn't be here today. But it was a real safety hazard. There are about 10 kids in the neighborhood under 10. They walk through our yard, they play there, they gather stones there. And I have a 3-year-old daughter. We have a 3-year-old daughter who plays there. So it had to be done fairly quickly, and my sincere apologies for not coming to you before getting that done. But it was very important to get it safe. And we were leaving for India just a week later, so we wanted to make sure that it's done.
Thank you. I just, we aren't saying that you did this intentionally.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
But if we could get to the matter.
Yes, so the matter at hand is that we would like to replace those 5 trees, those live trees. They were not mature trees, they were young trees, and we are very committed to replacing them, so we'd like to do that. The reason I did not put the species forward is that I wanted to work with Doreen to decide what's the optimal mix. She has a list that she offered to give me that we could choose from. The second reason that we wanted to come before you is that one of the recommendations made was to do 2 for 1. And I just wanted to tell you that nothing grows there. It is fully, if you look at the photos, it's full of dense tree cover. Nothing grows there except moss. And the water table is very high. Nothing but moss grows. Doesn't get sunlight. So I think if we put in a bond and said 80% survival for 10 trees, I just think it's never going to happen. And so I'm requesting committee to consider letting us do 1 for 1. I believe there's an ability to do that if we put them 15 feet apart. I believe there's a rule that says we may be permitted to put 5 trees 15 feet apart and see how they do. Also, I would like to recommend the timing. We have no problem with what's been recommended about April and May, but I don't think, at least you don't think.
Yeah, I think for the plantations, I'm looking through different kinds of trees, and a lot of the kinds of trees that I'm interested in, colorful maples and things like that, which would replace the native ones, which are also native here now. Those are not available until July for planting. And the landscaper said that the roots are very much overgrown in that area with these old trees, and it's going to be very difficult to cut through at this time, and he wants some time also to look at what it is and what he needs to do.
Okay. If I could just ask a question. So what you're asking to not go with the staff recommendation for a 2 for 1. Would it make sense for understory shrubs to be substituted out for those other 5 trees, given the, yeah.
I think it's reasonable given the situation. Of course, I'd always like to see maybe 7 trees, kind of split the difference.
But do you agree that the conditions are not favorable for growing trees?
I guess I don't know that. That whole area is wet. There's no understory. There's a lot of trees there, I imagine.
Would there be opportunity then for the other 5 to be an understory, shade-tolerant wetland understory planting rather than another tree?
I think that can be done, but I'm not sure. Again, the problem is with the dense roots that are there already, the fabric of roots. So cutting through that, and will smaller trees survive? Will even these trees at 1.5 inch caliper, how many
Right.
of them will survive because of that structure? So that's what our landscaper has to give guidance on that.
Okay.
And we will try to do more than 5.
Well, if we could do 5 trees and 5 shrubs, and maybe it would be a list that your landscaper reviews with staff and they would approve? Okay. And is that your only issue with this?
And so the timing is the other question, whether the nursery would have the right inventory and reasonably healthy plants for us to use.
Ones that would be tolerant in a wet
Right.
environment?
So July is when they say that it is the best planting.
Okay. Well, I'm flexible on doing that if staff is. Okay.
And the fees.
And then the final request, if there are any more questions?
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you say plant in July? It'd make more sense to either do it in June or to wait
Okay.
into the fall. The middle of the
Right.
summer is very dry. It's not likely to be a good time to plant and have those plants survive.
Yeah, the nursery, I was looking through catalogs and they said available in July, so that's why I was suggesting.
I think
Can get in June.
whatever accommodations are being made here The point is, you have to coordinate with staff, okay? We're not going to rely on the representation that you make based on something you read on the internet, okay? We have professional staff. You obviously have your own skill set, so just communicate.
Sure.
And
October would be fine.
let's accomplish what needs to be accomplished, okay?
Sure. The October is fine, because I think June might be tough to get the plans, so October is fine.
I got a quick one, too, maybe for staff. Do you think there's a significant break in the canopy for non-natives and invasives to colonize if a planting's not done sooner than later?
There's not a whole lot there, so we would watch for that, and generally I put that in as a condition. I don't know if I did that in this case. But, if we were to see invasives, we'd ask that they be taken care of as soon as
Yeah.
possible before they colonize and get
Yeah.
more aggressive.
Definitely, yes. And the fee.
And then the last request we had was at the end of Madam's presentation, is that we've been charged $4,560 for this application, and we respectfully request you to give us relief from that, because we did not take action
It was 1,500.
to destroy these trees, and in fact, we are
1,500.
keen to put them back.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We can discuss that. I think that's reasonable, given that you are going to be planning the 10 total, 5 and 5, right? At Knott's? Okay.
So what, no bond? What's the?
Well, no, I think it was the bond or the application fee we're talking? Yeah. So I would,
And then the posting of the bond, the timing of that, then I'm assuming would also be staggered to the October planting, is that correct?
I'm sorry?
The timing of the placement of the bond would also be pushed to map the October timing, is that
It
correct?
would be based upon when the plants go in,
Right.
and then the clock starts ticking at that
Right.
point. Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so, any public comments or questions on this application? Okay, well, I guess I'll make a motion.
Got a couple things to cover.
Right. One is to condition to provide 5 trees, 1.5 to 2 inches in caliper, and 5 understory shrubs to be worked out and confirmed with staff. Second would be the timing of the plantings would be either by June or in October, but again, to coordinate with staff on the timing. And thirdly, I would, since this wasn't a willful violation of removing trees because it was from deadfall, I'd reduce the application fee to the standard application fee of $1,500. Okay? Is there a second on that motion?
May I just add something?
Yes.
Could you put, when you're doing the dates, you add a phrase, but no later than, and then just.
Okay, but no later than October 2017.
Do we also need to have a special condition about invasives if they seem to be taking?
Yes, that would be good. And in the interim, if evidence of invasive species are taking over, those will be removed with a plan worked out with staff.
Sorry, I forgot to mention one thing. When the tree fell, it broke a lot of the, cracked a lot of the drainage pipes, the normal drainage system. So when we're planting, if we find cracked pipes, are we allowed to fix them?
You would come back to us with a permit to fix those, because you'd be doing work in the wetlands then.
Okay.
So that would be, we would have to survey before the planting and come up with what needs to be done there.
If there's evidence of
Yeah,
broken
cracked pipes.
drainage pipes and you wish to repair, you should come in and with a new application for staff.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that's my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, next, next is 2017-0 019, 471 Stanwich Road, Rocco V. DeAndrea, Inc., for Ning Li and Wan Gao for wetland remediation.
All right, so this was a violation that was found on the property in June 2016. I've passed out some pictures, aerials that show the property in 2003 and then the current conditions. Basically, that's showing you where the trees were removed on the property. They were removed at the front of the property, in the island at the driveway, and the island in the parking lot, and a little bit to the south of the parking lot. These trees, the closest is the one south of the parking lot. It's about 80 to 100 feet from the wetland. But they did take all these trees and this material as a result of that, and they piled it within and adjacent to the wetland, which is located to the east of the driveway. The applicant's proposing to remove that fill material and plant the wetland in the buffer with trees and shrubs. The quantity and the variety that they provided is very good, but the size of the planting stock needs to be increased. The applicant's also proposing to reconstruct a retention basin that was approved originally by the agency in 1976, which may have been filled as a result of this violation. The basin will be approximately 33 feet wide and 135 feet long, and as I said, located to the east of the parking lot. There'll be a 5-foot wide berm around the perimeter of the retention basin. The basin and the surrounding area will be seeded with meadow grass and forbs. Originally, the basin was installed to treat runoff water from the driveway and the surrounding lawn areas. They're looking to restore that function. According to the agent, the soil types beneath the retention basin consists of Group C, which is not typically doesn't have a good rate of infiltration. So the basin won't serve to infiltrate stormwater. However, a 6-inch pipe will be at the northern end of the basin. It'll be at an invert of 236, which is the bottom of the berm. Therefore, all the water that enters the basin will outlet at this point. The overflow weir in the central location of the retention basin is at an invert elevation of 238. The water will begin to overflow the weir at the beginning of the 25-year storm through the 100-year storm. They are proposing a boulder demarcation to the south of the retention basin that will run to the southern property line. Either side of those areas will be vegetated with a meadow mix. And that boulder demarcation is about 70 feet from the wetland. The retention basin will benefit the wetland by retaining and treating the stormwater runoff from the parking lot and from the surrounding areas. The planting plan will add diversity and reestablish the natural forest environment. Provided that the work is done as it's proposed and in a timely manner, it will benefit the wetland. Staff's recommending issuing an order to correct with the conditions provided in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Doreen. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Brian Smith. I'm here from Rocco DeAndrea Incorporated, representing the property owners tonight, Yuan Gao and Ning Li. Also here tonight with me is the client's attorney, Mr. David Lasnik. He'll be here to speak about speak on the filing fee after my presentation. As Doreen mentioned, we're here tonight due to the cease and correct order number 2016-10. Our goal is to remove the deposited tree material from the wetland and the wetland buffer, reconstruct the approved retention basin, install mitigation plantings, all while utilizing and maintaining proper erosion control measures throughout construction, and also until all the soil is stabilized. We have received, read, and accept all the conditions laid out in the March 21st, 2017 staff report. We are very aware of the time-sensitive dates that are laid out in said staff report, and we are eager to begin rectifying the wetland and wetland buffer area disturbance. Besides that, I'm here to answer any questions or engage in any conversation that the agency may have this evening.
Can you describe for me the fact that the lower orifice, or the regular outlet, the water will enter and then move through?
Correct.
Did the basin originally have an infiltration component?
No, the design that's on the proposed plans now is a direct copy of what was approved in 1976. So the original approved plan had a 6-inch low pipe with the 2-inch orifice at the bottom of the basin. We have experienced that sea soils do have some infiltration rate, but we don't rely on it. So there will be some infiltration through the soil strata below, but we are relying heavily on the vegetation at the base, the floor of the retention basin to really cool down the water, purify the water, slow the water down. And during storms higher than the 1-year storm, you actually will get some rise in the water level in the basin, and the 2-inch orifice on the 6-inch pipe will continue to trickle out slowly. And also, to add on to that, there is a riprap splash pad that needs to be reconstructed that's shown on the plans that were submitted, also exactly in the location of the approved riprap splash pad, so that we don't cause further, any type of erosion or scour that would be leading into the wetland area.
And the grass that's proposed, so there's a couple of things that come to mind. So it's my understanding there's sheet flow is how the overland flow from the parking lot enters the basin. Opportunities for more diverse vegetation than grass. I mean, certainly since 1976, we've learned a whole lot about basins, so I'm not, at face value, not a fan of a direct copy.
Okay.
I think we should look to see what can we incorporate that we've learned in those last 40
Within the basin,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, yeah, grass, I think, is probably kind of low, and I don't know, depending on what species grass you're proposing, its tolerance for inundation.
Okay, so you're looking for more wetland-type, heavy-duty grass, not non-mow?
Sedges, rushes, yeah, can still be in the 4 family, and if the basin can, by design, can tolerate woody vegetation, I would encourage that as well.
Okay, we plan to be revising the planting plan, obviously to satisfy the comments that were issued in the staff report. So we have no objection to exploring that, and I will reach out to Doreen prior to a formal submission to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Good. And are there opportunities to elongate the flow pattern? I know for sheet flow it's not what we normally see. Usually there's an inlet and an outlet, and but I'm wondering if low stone structures or something so it just doesn't enter in from the west and just, sorry, I don't have my glasses on.
Okay, currently we're proposing just a 5-foot wide lawn buffer area going into the retention basin, but we can change that from lawn to possibly large riprap to break up the sheet flow as it enters into the basin.
So it enters into the basin, and can you just point out where the outlet is?
Sure. Water will sheet flow over the parking area into the basin here, and then right here is going to be the 6-inch pipe.
Okay.
So the water does have to go across the entire basin in order to reach the outlet pipe and the orifice to make its way out.
Would there be an advantage from a pollution renovation standpoint to have low stone walls or others, microtopography to increase the flow, circuitous path?
Yes, I believe I could agree with that, and yes, we will propose something like that in order to elongate the flow path.
So, Pat, I'm a little confused on this one. So has DPW looked at this at all since 72 or 76? And should they be commenting on, I guess my next question is whether or not they should be commenting on any of the drainage designs that were discussion?
They have not reviewed it. I don't know if they should review it. Unfortunately, no.
Do you have an opinion, Pat, I guess?
Yeah, my experience with DPW, this is not the sort of project, if this was new construction, new parking lot, they review things for us to say, doesn't meet with the guidelines. This is fixing something that was previously approved. We're going to, it sounds like Mr. Smith is amenable
Can I
to.
just speak to that point?
Sure.
David Lasnick, attorney for the owners of the property. It hasn't been mentioned, and you probably all are aware, the approval in 72 and what has been there until my clients bought it was a Jehovah Witness church. And this property is now transitioning to a purely residential use. So certainly the rules have changed in how you might have analyzed that parking lot at the time, but I think the transition is going to be to not use it and to lessen the intensity of the use on this property. So I'm not telling you not to get hung up on that, but I think the thing that they're using it for now is quite different than it was proposed when those rules were first applied to this.
Okay, thank you.
So, and the retention basin is just not there when you're applying for it?
They've made no, other than, I'm sorry, other than the subject of this violation, they've made no changes to the property itself, only internal to the house. So, I mean, you can speak to the basin, but they've made no changes.
From my site observations, the basin was altered when the debris was placed. There's still remnants of the stone base, of some stone base, but I could not see where a berm used to be exactly anymore. But in order to move the trees and the stumps and the logs that were placed there, you would need heavy machinery. So without being there, I don't have the facts on exactly what this basin looked like, 5 years ago. I went to the town and I've got multiple GIS photographs. But again, from taking those photos from a helicopter or a plane, however they do it, you can't really get a good sense of the exterior perimeter of this basin. What we figured was we wanted to bring this site back up to what was approved in 76 and putting this basin back because you have such a large parking lot sheet flowing directly into a wetland buffer and ultimately into the wetland. We felt it was essential to get this basin rebuilt.
Thank you.
If I may, because I'm actually speaking here to the fee. Because this was considered a wetlands violation, there was a treble or a multiplier applied to the fee. And I think you could probably give the percentages, but I think substantially this is a violation of the buffer as opposed to the wetland. And we were hoping for some consideration of the board to lessen the severity of the penalty that we had to pay. And we have paid it when we filed the application. The other thing I would mention, and it is only peripherally related, but I represented my clients right after they bought the property several years ago before the Board of Assessment and Appeals. And we had the taxes reduced on this property from $25,000 a year to $8,000 because we had changed the use. Unfortunately, when the reval came last year, the assessor ignored that completely and restored the taxes to the $25,000. Now, I have just today received an approval of the appeal that I filed, but unfortunately, this past year, they have paid an additional $8,000 in taxes to Greenwich because the assessor reinstated the old assessment. So it doesn't really involve this board, but they have paid an extra $8,000 to the town of Greenwich that probably they didn't have to. So they've already been hit pretty hard. And if you're able to give them some consideration on the application fee, to the extent that that's within your power, we would ask you to do that.
Okay.
Possibly waiving the treble damages.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you have a point of view on that last request, Pat?
I do. So the agency has put into place the, I guess you could call them punitive, noteworthy multipliers, treble damages associated with the after-the-fact filing. This parcel, I don't know what the mitigating circumstances are from a wetland standpoint. We don't differentiate something as a violation or not a violation of whether it's in the buffer or actually in the wetland itself.
Right.
A regulated activity, a substantial regulated activity was conducted without permits or checking in with the office or anything. So I don't know what the mitigating circumstances are from a wetland standpoint. I appreciate what your clients are going through with the tax
I know,
collector.
different
That's got to be a
board,
bummer.
Right.
But I'm not sure that that's relevant to us.
Thank you. I would tend to agree with you. Before we go on, let me ask if there's any public comments, please. Yes, please, come up.
I am Cheryl Simon. I am the neighbor just to the north of your property.
Okay.
I don't think I need a microphone unless you're telling me I do.
Well, for everyone viewing at
Okay,
home.
certainly. And I'd like to state that it is not my intent to impede my neighbors' rehabilitation of their property. What I would like is the opportunity for my own engineer to further review the plan. I know there's been some issue of what happened to the property, and let me just set the stage for what the properties look like, because they're both unique. Mine is just to the north. It's a bit of a soup bowl, because in a feat of engineering befuddlement, the town put the drainage on the high side of Stanwich instead of the low side of Stanwich. Our house is built quite near to our southern border. The neighbor's quite near to the northern border, so we look in their kitchen window, they look in our kitchen window. The property has been clear cut from west to east. Stone walls in between our two properties have been removed. Truckload after truckload after truckload of fill has been brought onto the property. My concern is simply runoff water to my property as a result of that. I have spoken with an engineer about my initial concerns, which he made me feel better about the natural flow of the property. However, the issue was raised that the drainage of this property over a parking lot is now predicated upon the water snaking its way through a pipe that is just a couple of inches wide. Even if it is maintained in the best of circumstances, is going to get clogged, there's going to be overflow. I know there's a weir, and I apologize, I don't know the technical term for the swimming pool that's going to catch it, as well as water on the parking lot, which I can imagine in a storm is going to be stagnant water right next to where we spend all of our time. Perhaps there are no issues, and like I said, I'm not trying to impede their ability to rehabilitate their property, but I would like the opportunity to have my engineer further review the plan, especially about the small pipe and all of the water that's going to be coursing through it, and where is it going to go when it reaches a saturation point. I am much lower than their property, especially after all of the fill was brought onto the property, and I didn't hear anything about the fill being removed, just the trees. So that our property now is still a decline, whereas theirs is flat. And perhaps I am being an alarmist, but perhaps there is no issue. I would just like the opportunity to be assured that there's not an adverse impact on my neighboring property.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to respond to anything that was just said?
I am not aware of any, I'm not saying that there is no fill being brought in. I'm not aware of any fill that's been brought in. I've been focusing on the wetland buffer and the rear of the property. What I'd like, let's see, to the property to the north. Okay.
When you can take that to the big screen, maybe it may be
Sure.
easier to,
Okay.
I don't have any pointers to it.
So I believe Ms. Simon's property is the one abutting right above, correct? Okay, if the lines that are going from, these lines here, these are contour elevation lines, and the purpose of this retention basin on the surface here is to allow this water to continue downhill in this direction and not to the north. And this berm around the side is 2.5 feet high. So the water that comes in has to build up over 30 inches high, and then it is 2.5 feet high. At 24 inches, it will start going in the eastern direction towards the wetland and wetland buffer, which is significantly lower than your property, where I believe you'll be sitting from when I've been out to the site. I've looked at your rear yard. So I understand and I appreciate the fact that you'd want an engineer to look at it, because it is your property. I believe that the way that we plan to reconstruct this basin, that it would not have a negative impact on your property, because any overflow water would be going right here in the eastern direction towards the wetlands. I don't see how any work that we're proposing here would be sending any overland water to your property that's not going in there right now. What I'd like to do is figure out where the fill is being placed. If the fill is being placed and it's altering drainage patterns along the top of the plan, that could change the direction of surface water flow.
You need to speak in the mic, please. You have to have a record here. You have to speak in the mic.
Oh, yes, of course.
Do we have a pointer anywhere?
The fill, I think, well, I know, the plan was to level the backyard. And so the fill was placed in the wetland buffer where the trees are. A stone wall was removed, and that was made flat. And the issues I have been raised by an engineer, which is why I'm merely asking for the opportunity to have him opine whether there is an adverse impact or not. It's not to impede the ability to rehabilitate the property. It's not to be the recipient of water. When there is a lot of water coursing down the driveway, that is too much for a 6-inch pipe to deal with.
Thank you. Oh, now we have a pointer. Okay. So where to go with this one? Is there any other public questions or comments on this? Okay.
I have a question. Do we have any idea how much fill was actually placed on the site? How much fill has to be removed from the site?
I didn't observe any fill in that regard, that there were truckloads of fill brought in. I did see that, the tree trunks are quite large and they fill that area. Any of the debris that was pulled up as part of that is what it appeared to be to me. I didn't see piles of dirt or fill in any locations on the site besides that berm that was created by the trees.
Do we have?
Was the wall removed? Was there a wall removed?
There is a wall back there, and that sort of delineates roughly where the wetlands were. It still was there. I observed it on site.
Okay, and do we have any idea when these violations occurred?
We were notified around June 2016.
So, but had it just happened, or had it happened 20 years before when
No,
the
I think
place
it
was
had
secured?
happened recently. I believe that they're new property owners, and it had happened relatively soon after
Also
they
a
had taken.
mailing issue. It was being sent to a
Yes.
different address, and
That's right.
when
Yes.
it was finally brought to our attention, they were in violation.
Right.
They appeared to not be responding. and
So
I
like
think
in the
the
last
mail was
18
going to a
months.
different-
But the violation
Like in the
was
last 18 months.
created by the current owners of the
Yes,
property?
that's correct.
Okay.
But when you mentioned it was so long ago, I didn't want to imply they ignored it. I think there was a period of time they just didn't have a
The
copy.
question is, the current owners created the problem.
Yes.
Did they fill the wetland? Do they have records indicating that there was fill in the wetlands or there wasn't?
I believe the only thing that they're here for is this violation, which is a deposit of that material within the buffer zone, not any other fill.
Right.
How about this representation that it was the intent to level the backyard?
I don't know what their intent was. Again, within the context of this violation, I believe it is just a deposit of the plant material and whatever residual material is attached to that within the primarily the buffer and a small piece of the wall.
Well, then I'm a little confused here, because your item number 3, Doreen, says the applicant is proposing to remove logs and fill material. So,
The fill material I was speaking of was any kind of dirt and material that was excavated with the trees. So there was,
They stumped it, so.
yeah.
all right.
Do you know, based on observation, whether there's wetlands in the northern property line that this neighbor is speaking to that might be impacted by some deficiencies in drainage here?
So I had gone to the property. I had observed it from the neighbor's property as well as on the subject property. The wetlands runs, do you have a pointer? So it runs to the rear here, right around this area, and it very likely continues up this way. That's a very large, undeveloped swath of land that is all wetlands. There's lakes and small ponds and streams that connect. So it's a very nice, high-quality wetland. I did not see them clearing into the wetland area. You can see substantial trees were removed at the front and within this area, and these islands here, and then they just piled them here along this border.
Did I hear you say that you, based on the neighbors' comments, that you are going to review, or you need to review some drainage impact on the northern property?
I don't feel with anything that's proposed here that we're impacting the neighbor to the north in any way. I want to say two things on the record. The first is, as far as placement of fill in the wetland buffer, when I went out there, I was looking for this existing boulder demarcation wall, and at first sight, I couldn't see it. And I was trying to orientate myself, and then as I walked into the buffer area, I realized that a lot of the placed logs were covering up the wall. You can see it almost if you were to cut a section and you go to the side and you can see it. And then from there, I was able to see that the topography and the elevations that were approaching the boulder wall and then descending from the boulder wall into the wetland still have a consistent rolling slope that is shown on the existing topography. So I can't say that there's been fill placed there, and I don't think from the characteristics of the rolling topography towards the wetland area that there has been fill placed at this time. The last thing I'd like to say, the driveway has a decent slope heading towards this demarcation boulder wall here. And let me show it on the big screen. So this is the existing boulder wall there now.
Right.
This is the edge of the driveway. In order to actually flatten the backyard, they would either have to cut some of this area here and then fill this area here to create a plateau across this. And that's, if you go, when you're at the site, you can see that's not what's happening now. Now, this area has been flattened out and filled with these cut logs and wood debris, vegetation debris. And that's really why we're here, is to get that out and then to mitigate and enhance the wetland and the wetland buffer.
Are you opposed to allowing the neighbor, letting this continue to next month and allowing the neighbor to satisfy her concerns?
I'm sorry. I don't think the owner has any objection to working with the neighbor, but I don't want to get beyond the purpose of this hearing, which was to remediate, or get permission to remediate a potential violation. So, I mean, they're really two different issues. I mean, one is more sensitivity, or a sensitivity to the neighbor, and I think that's not inappropriate. But I think that's out of the context of this violation, which is why we're here, which is to cure, remove the material that was deposited within the wetland buffer and a portion of the wetlands, which has already been proposed. So, I mean, would you even have the power to make that a condition? I mean, it's outside the violation. So I think we're happy to work with the neighbor, and I don't think there's any problem there, but I don't know what else I can offer you on that.
I agree with you. So the request is really an accommodation.
Absolutely.
Where this water flows is down gradient from that property, so it's not going to affect laterally. I suspect, given the description of by the neighbor, the changes in topography and drainage, there might be a civil issue associated with drainage.
Well, I'm
that's
happy to give the
outside
neighbor my card and certainly open up communication with you on an ongoing basis, but to delay an approval so an engineer can look to see if activities outside the buffer are going to impact them, I don't know that that has anything to do with this, with all due respect.
I
agree.
Just asking if you're willing to make the accommodation.
Okay.
May I make a comment?
Please come up to the microphone if you
Yes,
wish
of
to do
course.
so.
The issue I'm raising was raised by an engineer. It is not my issue. I have tried to work with my neighbor for 2 years. They have done whatever they wanted on this property. I have personally seen the truckloads of fill. My husband has personally seen the truckloads of fill. I am not here to bash my neighbor. I am not here to impede their ability to rehabilitate their property. That is not my intent. My intent is to make sure that my property does not get any runoff or is not adversely affected for all of the things they have done to this property without permission, without coming before you. I have tried to work with them. That has not worked out well. I expressed my concerns to them in the very beginning of whatever they were doing, knowing they were doing everything clandestinely, including weekends, including Sunday mornings, including bringing truckloads of fill when one was around to see it. I have been to the Wetlands Department repeatedly asking for help, and Doreen has been lovely and wonderful and gracious and came out. I have had to go so far as to call the town's attorney because they were digging on the high-pressure pipeline, on top of the high-pressure pipeline, with a digger without ever calling call before you dig. Eversource came down, shut them down, came to me, said, we don't trust them. We filed 2 complaints against them. Don't trust them. Call the police if you see anything that looks wrong. So while I have tried to work with them, it has not worked out well. I do not want to impede your work. I do not want to impede their ability to rehabilitate their property. I received notice of this in the regular mail when I was away. I travel a great deal for work. And I had an engineer raise the issue to me that I am raising before you. Perhaps it all goes away, perhaps it is nothing. I would just like the opportunity to have the engineer review it and opine.
The thing is, we're talking over each other a little bit. We're a wetlands agency, so when you say you'd like an opportunity to have an engineer review it, that sounds, hold on,
Yes, of
hold on,
course.
let me finish. That sounds like it's in the context of your neighborly property owner concerns relative to work going on in this property, whereas our domain is to determine impacts on wetlands. And it doesn't appear, based on what you've said, and you haven't really even articulated whether or not you're asking for a delay. You're simply saying you want an opportunity to have your engineer review these plans. Well, there's been a representation that they're happy to cooperate with you, but we're not in a position to order that accommodation. Our domain is strictly to determine if there's an impact on a wetland, and it could be an impact on a wetland in an abutting property. However, we have not heard of an impact that would, in my opinion, give us an opportunity to delay or deny this application, because in fact what we want is for them to start rehabilitating this wetland. So from our agency point of view, we need to act on correcting the violation, and we're not unsympathetic to what you're saying, but what you're asking for is something beyond our realm.
I don't think so, because the issue I'm raising is the water drainage and the drainage system that is in place as raised by an engineer.
But you're not opining as to any deficiencies in this basin rehabilitation with regard to the impact on the upland review area. What you're saying is it's possible, based on some hearsay comments of your engineer, that there's going to be a drainage impact going north on your property.
Right.
Well, that's possible, but that is an issue between you and your neighbor and not within our domain at this point, because you haven't articulated as a neighbor an issue with a wetland.
Except for my wetlands is contiguous to theirs, and the engineer has raised the issue of the size of the pipe being insufficient to disperse the water. That is not hearsay. That is what was said to me. I have it in writing.
Well, why is your application, why are you not here with your engineer? What is the...
Because that conversation was had about an hour ago. I came from Connecticut when I was up in Hartford at a meeting, and I did have a conversation with a very well-respected engineer that you all know. He came to the house, he saw the property, and I am going to engage him, if you will allow me to review this plan for the very issues that you're asking. I guess my thought is, I don't think what I'm asking for is a lot in light of what's been done to the property without my understanding that the drainage doesn't impact my property.
Could I make a couple comments here?
Yes, of course.
You have testified that you have
I'm
seen,
not testifying.
well, you're on the record,
Yes.
okay, that you have observed truckloads of fill being brought
Correct.
onto the site. Do you have any idea where the fill was placed?
Yes,
Where was the fill placed?
in the east side of the property,
Near the
where the
wetland?
driveway ended.
Can you give her a pointer so we have a record here,
Yes.
please?
There's a button.
The issue that had with the wetlands on my property is here and here, the fill was brought in the property. So there was a wall that was contiguous with this.
Okay.
It was removed. This was all made flat. It might have a slight grade, as you can see from the contiguous property. And then all the trees were there.
Sorry.
Okay, so you're telling us that there was, fill was placed in the buffer area next to the wetland?
Buffer area is not a term I'm going to be familiar with. It
Within
was placed
30 feet.
next to- Yes,
The hatched area on the,
correct.
All right. So
Which is now raised significantly
Okay.
to my property.
now, I would say that that is definitely an impact within the buffer area, and we have to determine whether or not the fill is actually there and what is going to be required in removing it.
But we know there's impact to the upland review area. I don't disagree with
But
that.
there's nothing in this plan that has anything to do with removing that fill.
Although our,
isn't that,
Doreen said she didn't observe fill.
But now we have somebody who said she's seen truckloads of fill brought in.
And there's a second person that can tell you they
Add
also.
something here. I mean, I think we're dancing around this problem. We've heard that there may be fill and there may not be fill. I would suggest that we get a representation from the owner as to what exactly was put in the area that we're discussing. Was it in fact just material that came from the site and was moved there? Or was material brought in from off-site? We want a representation in writing explaining exactly what it is that we're looking at. And then we can go forward and make a determination as to what we need to do to correct it.
And the net of that is we delay.
Net of that is we delay.
and I have a question. The topography lines that are shown here on this plan, are these from a survey that you conducted, or is this the historical lines from the previous application?
Excellent. I knew we kept her around for some reason.
It is from a survey we performed. One thing I'd want to mention is anything that's shown, if that hatched area is going to be the newly rebuilt retention basin.
So-
Therefore, we'd be bringing it all back to the 1976 approved elevations. So regardless if there was fill that came off of tree trunks or there was fill that was brought from off-site and placed, it's going to be removed because we need to get back to those elevations because the wetlands elevation is set, the edge of the driveway elevation is set. So we had to work in between those two elevations to bring it back to the approved plan elevations from 1976.
So we don't really know what that elevation is underneath the debris that's there currently? Is that an accurate statement?
Not until all the debris is removed and we were able to field verify, I wouldn't be able to exactly tell you.
So we don't really know if the drainage patterns as they sit now are reflective of those topo lines in the shaded area? It could,
No, I'm sorry, that came out bizarre. The topography lines that are shown there now is what we survey located all the disturbed areas, including elevations. So that topography reflects what's in the field now.
okay.
I want to go back to Joe's request and the idea that we may not actually know the full extent of the violation to the property. And so I would, in addition to a representation from the owner as to what occurred, I would like to have a representation from anybody that she may have employed, any contractor, anybody that the applicants engaged to make changes to the property.
Could I ask the board on that point? If I understand, the solution is to restore the property to whatever condition it was long before what we know was placed there, and even maybe we don't know was placed there. The solution is going to be the same. It's going to be restored to the condition it was in. And we already had a discussion about the penalty being imposed, which is being imposed based on the assumption that there has been activity within a regulated area.
The thing is, when we're dealing, I don't mean to interrupt you, when we're dealing with fill that's been brought in from the outside, we do have other criteria, and we typically ask for verification as to where it came from, that it didn't contain toxic materials, that it meets certain criteria.
But
So
I don't know that was, again, in the context that we're here was a report of the violation reported by the inland wetland staff. They've been on the property, they've examined the property. All we have now is some hearsay statements from a neighbor who shows up 5 minutes before the hearing and claiming many things that I don't even want to repeat that she impugned on my client. You know, dark of the night, surreptitiously depositing things, removing things.
I thought you didn't want to repeat it.
The point is, we came here. All right, we came here for this hearing. Notice was given long ago. She's had plenty of time to bring her expert here, to bring any documentary evidence to support the allegations that she's making before this board. We came here based on the statements of staff. We put together a plan that was approved by staff, and we've agreed to do everything that staff has asked us to do. And I think that's what the board should be acting upon now.
the board can act on whatever it wishes to act on based on...
I'm requesting that the board...
No, based on evidence, so we have...
There is no evidence.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. We have heard testimony now that specifically has identified the possibility that there's fill that was brought into the property. You know, whether that creates a basis for a delay is what we're talking
Well, I have no response for that. If you wish to reschedule it and have the applicant come in and make that statement or submit that to the board, I guess we can do that. But again, you're asking me to prove a negative here. I mean, we have no knowledge of any fill being put there. Staff has not identified any fill that's being placed there, and so now you want us to prove that...
It's not a negative if it's within your client's control to make a representation
I think they can do
as to
that.
whether or not there was fill placed on the property.
So
There has been some ambiguous testimony about it by your own expert, to be honest.
Could you address, maybe you could address that.
Yeah, I think that it's been a bit vague as to whether or not the observable fill was debris from the tree stump removal or some other fill. I think you equivocated a little bit as to whether or not that was fill that was observed from an outside source or not. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But, you know, we have to assess...
I did not observe fill. I'm sorry.
We have to assess that issue. That's the issue that's been articulated by several agency members now. If in fact there is a fill issue, then that could be the basis for a delay, okay? That's really all we're considering.
My statement before was that the elevation of the edge of the driveway and the elevation at the demarcation boulder, I don't see where fill could have been placed. It's a slow, rolling, gentle slope. If fill was placed, there would be now a berm out in the field, and that's not reflected in the staff report. So I just...
Is the crushed stone native? The plan says there's crushed stone in that area. Is that native?
I do not know.
That must be fill.
Okay, I think we can, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
I think it's not unreasonable to delay this until the next hearing to get some of the answers that staff has and the board members have asked for. It would also afford the neighbor an opportunity to look at it. I think that if everything pans out as you've represented tonight, it'll be very quick at the next meeting, but I think prudence would dictate that we delay at this time until next month.
Ultimately, we have no objection to that. This is clearing a violation that the board is asking us to do. It's not
No, and we
stopping a
appreciate...
project, so that's fine.
We appreciate it. We appreciate it. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And there is a chance, just so you know, there is a chance that we may have a, depending upon our docket for next month, we may have an interim meeting, which would mean that it may actually be seen in a couple weeks as opposed to 4 weeks from now. Okay? Thank you. Okay. Okay, moving along, 2017-20, 14 Hope Farm Road, Rocco v. DeAndrea for Katie Guerin. Thank you. Jaron for construction of a tennis court, pool, cabana, and drainage 28 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausi, please.
Okay, I'm recommending the agency delay this. The drainage system that's been proposed has been reviewed by DPW Engineering, and they want some more information and some revisions. I also was waiting, when I wrote the staff report, I believe I was waiting for a planting plan. We did get a planting plan to do some trees and shrubs and herbaceous plants around the south and west side of the tennis court. I think I sent that out to you all in an email, if I didn't give you a hard copy the other day after doing this report. 3 agency members visited the site with me today, Mr. Schoendorf, Mr. Benton, and Mr.
Linderoth.
Linderoth, no. And we observed the site of the tennis court is proposed, nestled against a very significant rock outcropping here on the east. The existing pool cabana will be removed, and a new cabana will be built to the west of the pool. There's a code-complying septic system shown nestled into the existing leaching fields in front of the house, which is the only place you could get a system on this rocky site. Some concerns about proximity to the wetland, which is one of the reasons I asked for a planting plan. Question I raised was, could this court be shifted closer to the eastern property line? And Mr. French and his DeAndrea team explained that that would require a significantly greater amount of fill and site disturbance than this plan, which works as best as possible with the existing topography. And that's about it. Just a summary, but basically, I'd recommend a delay.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Brian French. I'm with Rocco DeAndrea, representing Katie Jaron. So Bob's pretty much summarized what we're proposing and how we look to push a tennis court as far east as we could, but you know, to not cause a significant amount of removal of ledge and disturbance on the site. It kind of fits right in where it looks to fit naturally. And so I guess in regards to a couple issues, so I looked at the DPW comments, and the rain garden, you know, we proposed is 700 square feet, and I have a pointer. See, it may be difficult, but it's right directly south of the tennis court, and it's approximately 14 feet wide by 50 feet long. And the comment, if I could read, you know, the very end of comment 2A from the DPW comments, it says the minimum area with 1.5 feet of bioretention soil and 6 inches of ponding is an area of 993 square feet. So basically saying that 993 square feet of a rain garden is required. We propose 700. So at a 50-foot length, that would be at the maximum a 6-foot extension of the disturbance south, which there's room for, and it doesn't impede any closer to the regulated area. It's just south, where the stream and the wetlands is west. And I think that just understanding that it's not, you know, encroaching closer to the wetlands, and just, you know, after reviewing the DPW comments, and after looking at some of the numbers today, we're actually able to elevate the rain garden slightly, which will add additional storage, and then hence reducing the extension that is required south. So if the main issue is the DPW comments, that maybe you consider the arguments that I just mentioned.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Further questions on this?
Yeah, the proposed tennis court where it is pretty close to a waterway with a very steep, kind of a V-cut, there's a stream and then a V-cut channel. Just a question, what kind of tennis court are you putting in there? Do you know the surface?
I believe it's the asphalt or hard true surface that's impervious, basically. It's
okay.
It's not lawn or clay.
Not clay?
Yeah.
Okay. I've seen clay that's discharged into waterways from those, so that's good to hear.
And if I could add, too, in addition, the court is actually pitched east. So therefore, it has a very small pitch, but we do have a collection drain that runs east of the tennis court, which, again, adds additional just consideration to guide water away from the wetlands.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, are there any other questions, public comment? I guess we're still, regardless, we're still waiting for the DPW comments on this, so.
Well, and my other comment now, you're proposing to remove about 9 trees. Some of them are pretty big, and after going back, corresponding with Mr. Pop on the restoration or the mitigation plan, he's provided a plan to plant 6 trees, along with several dozen shrubs and some herbaceous plants. I mean, I think a 1-for-1 replacement on the trees might be reasonable, so that there's, restoration of the shade regime down that slope across the wetland to the watercourse.
It's to the west, right?
So,
To the west of the fort.
Yeah, and there may be opportunities to plant trees in the wetland itself. So, look at gaps in the canopy within the wetland. There's some wind throws in there. But, when you come back next month, or before you come back, I'd like to see a plan with a minimum of 9 trees. With the shrubs are fine and everything else is fine, but the trees are important.
Yeah, there is some soil here as well in between the two.
But don't be afraid to look in the wetland.
Okay.
Good point, Bob. Thank you.
A question regarding your retaining wall. What is it made of?
Be stone masonry.
So it's the one that's shown, therefore, the construction of that wall will be taking place closer to the buffer, not within the confines of the tennis court.
It's roughly, I think, 1.5 feet in width, and a relatively sheer straight drop from there. I think it's a...
But they still will be working outside. It'll probably take another 3 to 5 feet with people working and storage of stone.
Yeah, and there's some buffer added between the silt fence, the proposed silt fence, and the retaining wall.
Just getting very close to it, very close to the edge.
Yeah, as suggested in the staff report, that there be core logs used over areas where there's ledge outcropping versus the hay bales, which we're happy to add to the plan as well. And where there is some soil, we could add an additional silt fence, and the best silt protection we can deal with pertaining to the surface. whether it's ledge or soil.
Okay, thank you. Someone like to make a motion? I'm sorry, is there public comment on this?
Motion to delay?
All in favor? Thank you. Okay. Next is application 2017-021, 64 West Brother Drive, Rocco V. DeAndrea, Inc., for Daniel and Jennifer Daniels, for construction of a pool and landscaping 15 feet from wetlands.
All right, the applicant's proposing to build a pool, a 14 by 38-foot pool, which is slightly smaller and, well, it's a fair amount narrower than a standard pool, on what's an existing lawn adjacent to their patio, their back patio. And we've gone back and forth with their engineering consultant about any potential impacts to flood elevations from the fill that the pool and its the little berm around the pool represent within the 100-year floodplain, and they've verified that there will not be as much as a 0.1 foot raise in the flood elevation due to this fill in the floodplain. They propose to do some enhancement of the wetland and buffer with plantings along the edge of the upper pond here, upper lake rather. And they're going to replace a big patch of Pachysandra in the southeast corner, yeah, that is the southeast corner of the property here, with native shrubs and herbaceous plants that will fit in nicely under the existing canopy trees. Let's see, I have a couple of erosion control recommendations here that are reflected in the conditions of approval, but this is a very tight residential lot. This is about as much as they're ever going to get out of this lot, but I do recommend the permit be issued for the pool.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Hello. My name is Josh Hannett. I'm a professional engineer with Rocco V. DeAndrea Incorporated, and we are representing the clients, Daniel and Jennifer Daniels. We have read through the conditions and agree with them. Don't have any issues, and I am here to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant on this? No. Is there any public questions or comments? No. Okay. Would someone like to make a motion, please?
Motion approved.
All in favor? All right. Okay. Thank you. Next is 2017-022, 16 Knollwood Drive, Rocco V. DeAndrea, Inc., for Linda and Stephen Munger, for residential redevelopment, 1 foot from a wetland. Pat, please.
This is a proposal to demolish an existing residence and reconstruct it. The agency actually saw this back in 2015 and approved a plan quite similar to this one. As part of that plan, there were, what's a tiny little one, areas of erosion within a stream that runs on the east and south edges of the property. That was a condition of approval that have now been incorporated into this plan. Similar, there was a plunge pool that was required. This one's coming and going. That is part of this plan. Thank you. Previously, this area was dedicated to thermal heating wells, and those have been removed and is now going to be pervious pavement, which will overflow down into the watercourse. So it's quite consistent with what the agency saw previously. Mr. Hannett and I have had an exchange with regards to fine-tuning where this overflow enters the stream. So I am satisfied. There's conditions of approval provided to the agency if it is your pleasure to approve this.
Thank you. Welcome.
And my name is Josh Hannon, professional engineer representing Stephen and Linda Munger for Rocco V. DeAndrea Incorporated. Pat basically covered what we were proposing, and I'd like to add that this design proposes a lot less disturbance and respects much of the natural topography of the site, which was previously approved under the prior permit in 2015. We have read through the conditions and agree with them all. And as Pat said, we have been in contact and addressed her issue with the location of the stormwater discharge. And that has been addressed. I have 2 prints with me actually today that addressed an additional concern that she had emailed me today, which was just another minor tweak to the location of the outlet. Again, we have no issues with the conditions, and I'm here to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions for the applicant on this? No? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion, please? I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. Is there public comments or questions on this? No? Someone like to make a motion? Norma seconds. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next up is application 2017-023, 44 Cutler Road, Land Tech for MCJB LLC for maintenance of gravel drive and shed 10 feet from wetlands, and a yoga platform and landscaping within wetlands. Doreen, please.
Thank you. This was a violation that was confirmed with the submission of the application. The resulting site inspection, staff found that unauthorized activities include a gravel driveway and a shed constructed on the northeastern part of the property adjacent to wetlands. A yoga platform that was constructed on the north central property line. Thank you. So the gravel driveway and shed is down in this location. The yoga platform is in the north central area. Also, there was a fence installed along the western property boundary, along the pond and the, that works, and the stream. The structures in the gravel driveway exceeded the 1,000 square foot impervious cover, which triggers the need for a stormwater drainage report to be reviewed by the engineering division. The applicant has since agreed to remove the gravel driveway, which reduces the impervious cover to about 328 square feet, which is the shed and the yoga platform. There was a permit that was issued in July 2009 to dredge the pond. They did some grading and they enhanced the wooded wetland in this location of the property. The permit was later modified to include a demolition rebuild of the house and all the associated activity with that. As part of that approval, the approximate 1/3 southern part of the property was to be restored with wetland plantings and delineated with a permanent demarcation feature. There are some pedestrian trails that were also approved. Some field inspections that were done during the process of the activity on the new house found that a lot of the trees on the southern part of the property that were mature were beginning to decline and they were dying, and they asked for them to be replaced. While out on site, it did not appear that there were any trees left, but the agent for the homeowners did go out there and count what they had done for the restoration plan, which is included. I gave you an email that he submitted to me over the weekend or late last week that shows that there's about 42 trees that were counted that include red oak, red maple, ash, gray birch, and apple within that restoration area. Previously, there had been about 32 trees that staff had counted on the previous survey. There was a planted demarcation that consisted of woody shrubs that were previously approved along this location here. Currently, they have a deer fence enclosing a portion of the restoration area, but the eastern part of that restoration is meadow, and you can see there's a line here where that meadow currently is maintained. The previous demarcation was out along this line here. Staff would like to see a demarcation feature that goes along that previously approved demarcation line. The applicant has proposed planting trees along the inner line. Again, I would like to see it go out and so that we have the full restoration area. There are some pedestrian paths that go around the restoration area that kind of expanded to the outer perimeter and through the center. Currently, the area has been mowed, but we did receive some pictures in the narrative that show the area during the summer months, and it was a nice meadow. The pedestrian paths are about the width of a wide lawnmower. And that seems to be in line with the original approval. The fence along the pond and the river is raised in many locations. There's some pictures also included with the little packet I gave you. So it allows for the migration of small animals. There's no real issue with that. Originally, staff was recommending delay, but with these issues addressed, and if we can address the demarcation feature, I have provided conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Tom Ryder, sorry, Senior Associate, Senior Biologist with Landtech. We are here to, as Doreen just mentioned, but there was authorize the metal fencing, authorize the yoga platform in the shed. We are agreeing to remove the gravel area, as mentioned. I just wanted to say it verbally. And enhance the demarcation area. As Doreen had mentioned, let's see which one of these has the button. This is the area that has been maintained right here and down here, and I've highlighted it. Green line here. This is the area that's been maintained by the applicant for the last 7 years. And I say 7 because I think this was a 2010 application. And they are asking for that line to be maintained. One of the things I should point out is they have done a lot of things and they're on their own to enhance this area. First of all, this is a Audubon certified healthy habitat property, which allows, well, it's certified by the Connecticut Audubon based on their abundance of native plantings. This whole area is organic land care. They do it all organically. They have a big water conservation program, and they've shown that they improve or don't negate, or they're very conscious of water quality protection. So all of that allowed them to get the healthy habitat by the Audubon. One of the residents of the property is also on the director or the chair of the board of directors on the Greenwich Audubon as well. As I mentioned, organic landscaping. The demarcation that is proposed along this area. Originally, when I was speaking with Doreen, we had come up with a number of capable demarcation features. One of them was, the standard 4x4 posts, the concrete posts, large boulders or shrubs. The applicant came back to me and said, well, what I'd like to actually do then is provide red maple trees. And I said, well, that's bigger than what they were expecting. They said, well, that's fine, but that's what I want to do. So we put the red maple trees on this property, and we spaced them out accordingly for the maturation rate. And we have provided photos originally showing that this area is maintained as meadow and has been maintained, again, for 7 years as well, the restoration area, on their own without any other issues from the town. And also, they had said that they're willing to go out next week and plant, and then have the town go out there and confirm that everything's in place. I then told them you can't really plant next week. You have to be planting in a couple weeks, but a few weeks from now. But that he was eager to, get this planted and get the town out there to show that it has all been resolved pretty effectively and efficiently. So with that, he had asked me to ask for this line, which is shown here on this map plan, to be maintained with the demarcation features.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, do we have?
Conditions.
What's that? Oh, go ahead. Okay. I guess what I'm looking for is just the, do we have a planning plan that shows the red maples? Or that's something that came up today?
That is something that I have made copies for. They're sitting on my desk with the agenda. I can leave this one here. It's marked up slightly. I can leave it with you, with Doreen. I'm certainly willing to drop off the plans tomorrow, but let me just show you what you have in front of you, the additions. Probably the easiest way to do this is the additions is that in front of you on the plan here are 4 trees spaced 40 feet on center here, 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 and there. So here, 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 and here. Those are the additions, as well as a note here saying that the gravel will be removed, so I apologize for not having them, but they are on my desk.
And Doreen, you were suggesting or you were discussing a boulder demarcation or something that would be more permanent. I guess my concern would be spacing just 4 trees 40 feet apart. Any future owner would not have any idea that that's a demarcation feature unless there was something interspersed in between those trees, whether it be boulders or something along those lines. So I'm not sure how.
They could we have placards they could use. As the tree gets older, you could either add it to the tree, or while the tree is smaller, you can put it on a
4x4 post or something like that.
That would indicate that, and that would be more permanent.
That is true.
We did originally approve a vegetated buffer, a delineated demarcation, so it would kind of fit in with that, but I think that the markers would certainly make it more pronounced.
Are you okay keeping the demarcation line? No.
Well, I guess that would be for you to decide. Of course, I want to encompass what was originally approved, but if you are comfortable with that.
Well, can I give?
Please.
Because I did the review of the original application, and originally, this area was full of fill, rocks, you name it. It had trees in it, but they were growing out of, like the prior owner had used it as a, place to unload his dump trucks. And
okay.
So it's a great improvement now. The shape of the restoration area is substantially what was approved on the original plan. The actual edge of the natural area here between the lawn and the natural area is a little bit different, but I would say it meets the intent of the agency. And I'd also note that a lot of this area is not wetland. It's upland. So it's not like they're getting more lawn in the wetland. The shape is just a little bit different.
Fair enough. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Public questions or comments? Nope, doesn't look like it. Would someone like to make a motion on this application?
Motion to, okay, here we go. Motion to approve with the conditions that have been supplied.
Placards.
Item number 1 here is a revised permanent buffer demarcation plan shall be submitted. Okay.
I guess just reference that we're going to incorporate maples that are in the posts.
And we're going to
And brought to
incorporate the
the hearing.
maples and the posts and all the rest of the stuff we've talked about, right?
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay.
We have a second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you all for your
Clear?
time.
Okay, thanks.
Last but not least.
Okay, moving on, 2017-024, 29 Richmond Hill Road, Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors for Fernando Lorenco, for construction of an addition, porch, patio, and landscaping 26 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausi, please.
All right. This project has a few little elements. In the front of the house, they want to do a garage bump out and then modify the driveway to meet the new garage. A good portion of that modified driveway will be pervious pavement. There will be a rain garden in an open area between existing driveway segments. In the back, they want to put a patio and some retaining walls.
I'm sorry, Bob, 1 second. Doreen, could you just zoom in so we can, so the property lines fill the screen? There you go, just center that.
If I zoom in a little bit more, all the work is right.
Right around the house.
Okay.
This is a fairly simple project, just to summarize it. Yes, the activities are, a little bit close to the wetlands at 45 feet. But, this is, the area around the house is quite level. This is almost like a trenched watercourse. The main part of the wetland is in the northwest corner of the property over here, where no activities are being proposed. The DPW has asked for a few additional information items regarding the drainage system. Given the distance from the regulated area of the drainage components, I don't think that this is something that we need to hold up, because the comments are quite minor, and any change will be within the footprint, more or less, of the existing proposal. The only other thing I'd note is that in order to get through the health department, I guess, the applicant had to show a code-complying septic replacement area, which is here in the southeast corner of the property. And there's a drainage ditch right here that feeds into the flagged watercourse wetland. And the septic gallery is a little bit up gradient, but sideways from the head of that ditch. It just so happened that last week, the fellow from Hartford, from the Department of Public Health, who the health department goes to whenever they have a question about a very complicated septic installation, was here in town on another matter, but was shown this plan, and he said it's okay from the health department's point of view for that layout. All I would say is that it seems from the test pit results that the soil conditions are pretty much the same going west of that. So in the future, if this ever had to be developed, the agency might want to get the applicant to push the galleries a little bit to the west, so it's at least even with or a little bit downslope of the head of that ditch. And Mr. Muller's here, and he could correct me if I was wrong in my interpretation of that. But I would recommend the agency issue a permit for this with the conditions provided in the staff report.
Thank you.
Brian Muller representing the client, Soundview Engineers. Sorry about that. Sorry about blocking you guys. That was funny, though. Yeah, and Bob's absolutely right. This septic here is just for reserve. If it was to be proposed for some reason, if there was some type of failure with this septic area, if this did fail, it would actually probably benefit to put these in, because now we're pulling away all this effluent, because this effluent's all flowing downhill into the wetlands. This was obviously installed well before the required 60-foot regulation came into place, because as you can see, these edges of these rows here are a little bit closer than 60 feet. They're probably about 45, 50 feet away, which is very close. And as Mr. Clausen stated here too, Matt Pollock is the state official with the health department. And if these were to be installed in the location they are proposed right now, the effluent would flow perpendicular to the contours, so it would flow downhill. It is possible to push these downhill if the agency, if we ever had to install them. I think we even have to come back to the agency too for a permit, because they're within the 100 feet of the wetland anyways. But these are just simply code compliant area, so that the health department knows we're not taking up valuable septic space to do the improvements we would like to do, which we have to prove anytime we do any type of addition to a house that's on septic. So that's a simple change. Everything else we tried to keep as far away from the wetland as possible. All the disturbance we tried to keep upland of the existing disturbance, as the rain garden, all the drainage systems are all kept within the existing disturbance area, except for the back terrace here. There was an existing patio there. We're making it a bit larger. These walls are also being put into place to correct a nonconformity. The existing building doesn't conform to the grade plane regs that we have now. So these walls will bring that into conformity, as well as providing a benefit to the homeowner that they can have a nice flat terraced area here, which blends well with the house. And the Scott Marucci's comments, actually, I've already addressed them. I haven't submitted them officially to Wetlands yet, but the comments were to perform saturated hydraulic connectivity tests to prove the permeability of the soils and how fast water drains. And they did reflect, the data did reflect the type of soils that are out here. That's what these blue lines are actually. They show the difference in the different soils on site per the USGS soil survey, which anyone can go and look at online. Those were basically the only comments Scott had. The soils were well drained. They ended up draining pretty well, so I'm confident that any stormwater that drains into these two drainage systems will drain out within 72 hours, which is a town requirement, so there's no mosquitoes or any type of insects that would inhabit there. It's a pretty straightforward application. The disturbance area is also marked by this orange construction fence, which will be installed during or before the construction begins to limit the disturbance around the property. So this is going to be a very tight envelope here for them to get around to do this, but it's definitely doable. The tightest area right here is about 18 feet, and a big machine can get through there, and they won't even need a big machine really to do that back terrace.
Right.
It'll be a mini
Thank you.
excavator at the most.
Okay, great. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Any
just
public
wanted-
questions or comments? Yes?
Clarify that the agency approves this, the B100 that's shown there, in the absence of a modifying special condition, during the life of this permit, that owner would be able to come in and ask for us to sign off to go build this. So
shift it now or forever hold your peace?
Or state, it can certainly be a special condition that says, the system will, if that aspect is implemented, the engineer of record will shift it to the west, if it even needs to be shifted to the west. I don't know, is it a feel-good thing, or does it actually make a difference?
Personally, I think it can be installed the way it is without infecting the wetland. Like I said, the effluent would flow directly
Right.
downhill. It wouldn't get over there. It doesn't just flow to the side. So I would feel comfortable with it being there. I honestly don't feel comfortable with the existing septic system where it is. So I think that system would be a huge increase for this particular site. But it is definitely possible to put in the special condition that if it ever is to need to be installed, we can push it 10 feet down slope just as a safety concern.
And bring in an S&E plan.
And an S&E plan to wetlands. I don't think it'll ever need to be installed. We're increasing the bedroom count by one bedroom, which is allowed within the health code to increase one bedroom on the existing system. And the existing system has a big spread because of the high groundwater out there. So, and it hasn't failed in 30 years.
Maybe we want it to fail, though.
We probably do, honestly. Want it to fail and have to put that one in.
Okay.
That would be a newfangled system, so it would
Right.
definitely disperse the effluent a lot better.
Okay.
Thank you. Public questions or comments? Would someone like to make a
Motion to approve is modified by Ms. Sesto.
All in favor? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we're moving other business up above agent approvals, so we are going to discuss where is it living here? Application 2015-028, 269 Palmer Hill Road, 269 Palmer Hill Road LLC. And Bob, are you discussing this?
Yes,
Okay.
sir. All right, in your colorful folders, I put a couple of handouts that I'd like to refer to as I make what I hope are brief comments on this. Back in April 2015, the agency looked at this site, which is a large site, came in for a 6-lot subdivision with a fairly substantial open space area. The application was submitted not only with a subdivision plan, including site sort of subdivision-wide drainage system. It was submitted with a habitat enhancement plan. And both of those, the whole package was discussed at the meeting on that April evening in 2015. The project narrative on page 2 talks about the enhancement plan as something that the applicant wanted to do and was proposing as part of their submission. Second thing, my staff report of April 22nd on the second page, top of the page, talks about this enhancement plan and how it would be a benefit to the wetland. Okay, so at the end of that discussion, the agency, which that evening present were Mr. Harris, Mr. Benton, Mr. Scouflos, Mr. Galvin, Mr. Rogers, Ms. Curlin, Jim Carr, and Mr. Schoendorf was here as an alternate. The agency approved the application unanimously. So I was, at the time, senior wetlands analyst and acting director, juggling a couple of balls. So when the when I went back, we generated the document, we generated a conceptual approval, and it said, the agency has approved the following, and it listed the Rocco DeAndrea plans plus the habitat enhancement plan. But it did not include conditions of approval of a permit to do the enhancement work. It only included conceptual conditions for the subdivision. So I'd like to suggest to the agency, as we hand these out, that I think the agency intended for this enhancement work to be done. And I have spoken to the developer, Mr. Handler, and Mr. Kenny and Mr. Handler's attorney about this, and we went over these points on the handout here, which would be the conditions that would have been applied to a permit to do the enhancement work. And they have agreed that they will implement this work abiding by these conditions. Mr. Kenny also is here tonight to discuss the top item on the list here about what he thinks it will take to stabilize the watercourse channel when the culvert under the existing access drive is removed to open up the watercourse. So pending, a satisfactory discussion with Mr. Kenny, I would recommend the agency acknowledge it intended for this habitat enhancement plan to be implemented, and that the agency affirm that this work can be conducted with these conditions or maybe some other ones that you think are important.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome, Mr. Kenny.
Good evening. I have a little bit of paperwork I could pass out to you.
Sure.
Regarding the pipe.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
First, as I agree with everything that Bob described with regard to the conceptual approval, and then with regard to the conditions, or I'm not sure what would have been permit conditions. And it is true that the permittee or the owner applicant of the conceptual approval is in agreement with those conditions. So what I've given you here is a view from Hillcrest Lane of the watercourse in question. It's a view down into the property, and you could see in the distance the driveway that existed on the property, where this area where the watercourse comes through is going to be part of an open space parcel. So the proposal was to remove the driveway, take out the pipe. You can see the 6-inch or so small pipe that would be removed. And I thought this picture of the watercourse gives you a good idea of the size of the watercourse and the structure. Basically, there's a native small riprap base stabilizing the bottom, and then the banks are earthen, and the area where the pipe is relatively level because of the driveway. It drops off steeply beyond that, but we would put in a detail, and I just pulled this together today because this is all coming together quickly, but the third page I provided was a detail that we've used on a different job on another project, and I think that something like this we would submit for this and use for this project. Basically a native stone riprap for the bottom of the channel, and then using some coir logs, coconut fiber logs on the banks of the channel. And then at immediately downstream of the outlet of the pipe, where the pipe is today, just rather than the coir logs, we would probably just use all stone because it drops off steeply there.
And I had looked at this quickly before the meeting, and being familiar with the site, I think this is, a very reasonable proposal. It's notable that the area below the outfall of that pipe, is much, it's steeper than the rest of it, and seems to be fairly stable. It's got a lot of rock. So maybe mimicking that as you pull the pipe out and feather that into the softer approach for the upper channel would make sense to me.
I think there's outlet protection that exists there today at the end of the pipe.
Right.
And otherwise it would have been cut back over time from erosion. So it's fairly stable it is stable at the
So
outlet.
the pipe is creating some sort of retention
Upstream.
upstream of
Right.
that.
So we
Okay.
have a note on the drawing that that's making the upstream area a little wetter, and so we would make sure that the watercourse invert, the bottom isn't deeper, that would then dry out that upstream. So we'd keep the bottom of the watercourse at the same elevation of the pipe so that we don't dry out the area that's immediately upstream of it.
Okay.
How did we catch this, Bob?
How did we catch it?
Yeah.
We didn't catch it, we were caught. They wanted to start the work, and I said, oh, shoot, you don't have a permit.
Got it. Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Kenny on this? Now, this goes downhill to
Apple tree.
our friends down there, the apple tree. So none of this work will affect flows down there. I mean, it's the same.
This goes
Similar. Goes, apple tree is right at the bottom of the hill, remember? Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Kenny?
Nope.
Public comment? Someone like to make a
motion that the agency acknowledges that it intended for the developer to implement the habitat enhancement plan as part of its approval of the subdivision, and it affirms this work can be conducted based on the agreed upon conditions provided today, March 27th.
Okay, is there a second? Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So help me God. Okay, agent approval permits. We have several. Let's see here. Agent approval permits, where I'm just going to read the application numbers: 2017-016, 27 Perkins Road, 2017-017 Riversville Road, 2016-026, 23 Portchuck Road, 2317-027 52 John Street, and 2017-034 38 and 40 Strickland Road. Are there any questions for staff regarding these agent approvals? Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, I think
yes.
that there might be a typo on the agent approvals, number
Okay.
3.
Or else I just read it wrong.
It says 2016-26.
Okay, yep. Very good. Okay. Next, we have applications to be received. We have the first 15, and then we need a motion to add to this list items 16 through 21. Okay, is there a second?
Sure. Second.
Okay, so all in favor of receiving applications 1 through 21 inclusively, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, on to violations. I guess they're. Okay, violation, cease and correct order 2009-02 for Edward Martino, 3 Carriage Road, failure to comply with the conditions of IWWA permit 01-145, and failure to maintain plantings and restore a wetland and buffer. Doreen, please.
Okay, this was originally a permit that was issued to Mr. Martino for the construction of residential additions, pool, patio, septic expansion, and driveway modifications. In December 2008, staff was doing site inspections and found that there was a significant amount of fill deposited to the rear of the property within about 15 feet of wetlands. The fill was up to 7 feet in height in some areas, and it buried multiple mature hardwood trees. As a result of the violation, a cease and correct order was issued that was 2009-02, and a notice of violation was placed on the land record. Since then, the permit was modified to correct the fill violation by removing the fill and replanting the bank along the pond with shrubs and herbaceous vegetation. Both of these activities were completed successfully. Staff conducted an inspection in 2011 and found that the restoration plantings were acceptable after the 2-year hold, but there was one condition outstanding. We required that an environmental consultant provide written certification that the fill was removed as required. So a letter was sent to Mr. Martino in December to alert him to this issue. Staff again inspected the site in June 2016 with the intention of releasing the bond, provided that the plantings were thriving. And lift the certificate of violation off the land records, but returning to the site, it was found that the area was being used to dump landscape and that there were no shrubs remaining. So a letter was sent requiring that the area be cleaned out and replanted. Mr. Martino recently came to the counter hours, that was March 8th, and looking for the bond to be refunded. When presented with the letter to restore the area, he emphatically stated that he did not want to do any more work within that area. Staff resent the cease and correct order and to Mr. Martino by regular and certified mail on March 20th. Since then, Mr. Martino has been in contact with staff and is willing to plant something in that area that is maybe better suited to survive and more affordable. He's here and he'll speak to that issue. But at this time, staff is recommending that the cease and correct order be maintained and further recommends it be referred to the law department if a resolution can't be worked out.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. Yeah, this has been an ongoing hardship. As noted, there was a violation, and I immediately corrected it. There was fill that was put in there by a contractor. This was this town. The town is aware.
Sorry, could you just speak into the microphone? We just
has had numerous violations. So I did, address this immediately. That cost, about $15,000 to get that fixed. I eventually took the contractor to court and prevailed in court over him. Also did the plantings, as noted. And, there was a tree fell in the area, and I had, a landscaper chop it up. That was also noted that had to be removed, and that was removed. I did put in the plantings. That did cost several $1,000s. The plantings lasted for a long time, and then, of course, there was a drought, and the town told us not to use water. So some of the plantings did die. The whole area is very, very difficult to maintain. The pond itself, by the way, is dried out all summer. It's dried, and I've spoken in the past to some folks in the wetlands about, can I dredge it, can I fill it in, can I do something with it, because it's completely dried. So all I'm asking for is, the plantings that were originally proposed were, extensive plantings that require a lot of work, a lot of maintenance, a lot of costs, and I just don't think it's fair to be adding all these costs on top of it, plus an engineer to throw in there. And, what I did say when I saw, the wetlands on the 8th, it's not that I asked for my bond back. That's not the way we ended. I said, for $1,500, this is costing me, $5,000, $6,000. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I said, I think Ms. Sesto said, we'll go to court. And I said, okay, if you want to go to court, we'll go to court. It's might be better to, get in front of a judge and talk about the hardships that I'm going through to try to remediate the situation as much as possible. So all I'm asking for here is a way to find a way where it's lower cost, given, again, the dried out area there, given, again, the inability to water, lower the cost. I mean, what are we trying to do here? There's, I don't understand what the exposure is to a pond that's dried out all summer long. It's a lot of hardship put on me to make it look, beautified, and for what cause? And especially since, we continue to have these droughts, we can't use water. I'm going to be in the same pickle here again in another couple of years. Mm-hmm. And that's really the sum of it.
Mr. Martino, could you explain a bit about the fill in the area where the shrubs, the 2016 observation that fill was in the area?
I'm not clear on the
It's more like there was landscaping debris.
Landscaping debris.
It was a tree. The tree fell down, and I had a landscaper come by and chop it up. So it was
just the one
sitting
tree?
there, and that had to be removed.
There were, I believe, various piles. They weren't significant, but they were in that location, so it was
Was
noted.
that removed?
Yes.
What is your, other than to say that you've had hardship, what is your intention of addressing this? What do you want to do?
Well, I mean,
Short of going to court, what do you want to do?
I want to do the most minimum to please, the wetlands possible. Because again, I'm not sure why putting shrubs in there is benefiting anything.
Is the pond a man-made pond?
No.
No?
It's,
Part of
and
a-
by the way,
is it part of a-
speaking of wetlands, I moved into this neighborhood 20 years ago tomorrow. My daughter was born, she'll be 20 tomorrow. So 20 years ago, that pond was beautiful. But the wetlands really has not done its job, because over the time, you've constricted all of the water flow going into that to the point now that it's completely dried out. So, we're protecting something that's really dried out at this point. And it's a shame. I mean, I bought the property because, one of the reasons was it was a nice pond. Now I got to look at, a dried out area. And I'm told I got to add all this nice vegetation to make it look great.
Doreen, is it a vernal pool that we're talking about that's full in the spring and then drying out by summer? Did you get that kind of look at it? that
No,
it
I
could be?
don't believe it was. I know that it supports amphibians at other times, but over this period of drought, I did not observe that.
It is absolutely dry in the summer. You can walk in there, it's almost like a baseball field. And I believe I do have pictures to show. But it's dry in the summer. It's nice, you got some, water there now. But don't forget, this is the property that I'm on is a little spin-off of a larger area. The larger area gets dried up. My property depends on the larger area. And when that dries up, then there's absolutely nothing. So I'm a extension of another pond, and it's just a small piece of it, and it's dried up.
Doreen, if you had to venture your professional judgment, what do you think caused the death or absence of the shrubs?
Well, they had been in place for a good 2 years, and so they should have, got established. But there was a severe drought, and if that water is dried up within the pond, it might have been an issue and caused them to.
Did you see the remnants of the shrubs there, or there was just completely non-existent?
I didn't see any sticks or shrubs that are dried out or dead. I didn't see anything there.
And about the last time you did the inspection where you saw the plants, were they 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet tall?
I have pictures in the file. I believe that they were. My memory serves.
So these weren't 18-inch tall shrubs that could just go away all that easy. Do you think it was deer browsing observed?
I think that there's the potential for that. I mean, the environment allows for that, so that's possible. I didn't observe anything that showed that they were chewed. I don't
How
have
many
proof.
shrubs?
Let me take a look.
How long did these shrubs survive?
A few years. They survive for a few years. But the whole area gets very, very dried out there. And by the way, there are trees there, so there's not that much lighting either.
Pat, when we issue a permit with a planting plan, we normally have a period of time that the plants have to survive. But after that time is over, we don't have a requirement that there must always be plants there, do we?
So I'm going to give you a yes and a no. So once the plants become established, we've now created a young forested area with understory. So if we were to come back in 5 years and it's now open meadow, then clearing would have had to have occurred, which would be the regulated activity. So you don't forever have to have the 15 trees and 32 shrubs, but you do have to have a wooded area with shrubs, if that was the intended. I'm using that by way of an example. So yeah, those characteristics of that floral association stay.
What if after 2 years, the plants just died because of a drought and the owner didn't make any changes in the area?
So then the plan failed, and it's the obligation of the owner or the applicant, the violator, to have 80% survival. The plants, to me, it strikes me as odd that plants that were established for 2 to 3 years due to the drought went away, completely went away. That there's something, I mean, I'm not familiar with the history of the site, but that strikes me as odd.
When did staff observe the plant's survivability? When did they, I mean, it says in your report that the plants.
2011.
Yes, I had gone out there, let's see,
2011?
2011. And then we had, 2 years prior to that, had gone out there and originally inspected it then. 2 years later, we came back and they looked good. And then 5 years
2
later.
years later, after 2011?
No, up to 2011. Now, there's 2011, as this is written, 2011 was the 2-year time frame. And the
Right.
plans were found that they were acceptable after the 2-year holding period. And at that time, the bond could have been given back, but there was another condition, which is what the hang-up became.
And this was, there was primarily, were shrubs, no trees involved in that?
There were no, in fact, there were ferns, there was blue flag, and there were steeple bush and feather bush. And there were about 45, so there was like 22 shrubs, and then herbaceous vegetation for the rest of that. And it was there, and then returning in 2016, it was no longer there.
What happened between December 11th and
June.
what happened?
Sorry, what was that?
What happened between December of 2011, when you alerted Mr. Martino that there was an outstanding issue, and then it would appear that nothing happened until staff conducted inspection 5 years later?
So this has a certificate violation on the land records, and so we are holding that in place until it's corrected. They had almost corrected it fully. One outstanding condition, so we were holding on to that with the anticipation that we would receive it. Not having received it, I had gone back, if everything was going to, look as it did when I had seen it after the 2-year hold, I was ready to release the bond.
And the open item was the letter?
Yes, it was a certification from an environmental consultant stating that the fill was fully removed.
But it would appear that after the letter was sent to Mr. Martino in December of 2011, it would appear that he didn't respond, nor did the agency follow up. 5
That's
years.
correct, yes.
So everything went silent.
And we can assume from the way this is written that in 2011, you observed that the fill was gone.
Yes, all the fill material, well, it was removed. There was a lot of fill. There was a
So
lot of
the
fill.
only,
Okay, just that one letter. was the only-
so it was the administrative letter that an engineer hadn't certified what you had seen.
It was a requirement, it was a condition built
I
into the order to
understand.
correct.
I understand there was a condition.
So yes, substantially the fill was removed. We wanted to be sure that it was down to the parent material.
Okay. And what is there now? I mean, is it grass? Is it dirt? What is it?
It looks like a lot of leaves, dried leaves, and there's some ground cover, but specifically along the bank, it looks like leaves and some landscape debris.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is whether the shrubs have been removed and the area turned into something more recreational, more useful, or whether this is just something that's died and it's now just in its sort of natural, the stuff died state.
It hasn't been expanded as lawn. It looks like maybe, landscapers maybe blew leaves over in that location. If it occurred naturally, I can't say.
Okay.
One of the things that we were most,
2011, and the last time Doreen visited, how long did the shrubs survive?
Probably about after 2011, I think until the last 2 years maybe, 2 years ago. So let's figure it's now 16, probably 14, 15, probably
So the
about 3 or
drought
4
really
years.
is not relevant to, the existing drought wasn't relevant to their survivability. You're just saying the topography
Within the
generally-
last year, because I think, we had some drought last, in 15 and 16. So I think it's been, the drought, in 15, the drought last summer, I think last summer's really finished.
Would Bob, would a meadow mix be something that would survive in that area? Or is it too shady, or is that, I'm thinking, is there a buffer, another buffer strategy that?
I think that might be difficult to establish if it's dry in that area. Maybe ferns or something like this might be more beneficial in that location. Yep.
Bob, you were going to say something.
yeah, I was going to say that one of the main things we were concerned about when we saw this site originally was the fill around the trees around the pond, because it was very deep around the trunks of the trees. So I guess my question to Doreen is if the canopy is still intact and the trees are still there, and the fill is, by looking at it, seems to be gone, that's 90% of what we needed done. The shrubs, the planting was more aimed at restabilizing or giving some stability to the edge of the pond. And, it may be, so I guess if the trees are there, that's a big thing.
Right. Okay.
If Mr. Martino would like, I'd be happy to go out with Doreen. I think that our own professional judgment, did the letter ever come in from? No. Okay, so in our own professional judgment, we can certainly look to see if there are roots near the surface. It's pretty easy if the tree trunk, it either has a flare or it doesn't. So I think we can reasonably assess if the fill was taken out to the extent it should have been. And then perhaps, I'll pass down Doreen's photos. This is at an edge of a wooded area. I don't know why the shrubs, they seem like they're in an open area, so I don't have an obvious reason why they would die. But perhaps we can work towards something that is desirable to Mr. Martino and also beneficial to the wetland in a minimalistic.
You mean by way of a cooperative consultation?
Yes.
I think that's the right solution.
I do too.
I'm sympathetic.
Frankly, I'm a little concerned now about fill. The fill was remediated. I mean, I've done everything required.
I'm
Now
not
you're-
suggesting that you didn't. We're missing a letter from a professional. I'm saying that I will instead make that inspection, and if you don't agree with what I come up with, then you are more than welcome to have your professional do it. But I'm
Okay, I
trying to
just got me a
skip
little
that part.
concerned when you said that there might still be fill there, because that was all remediated.
No, we don't officially know because we never received the letter.
It'd be good having the staff.
Okay.
That's a good.
I
next
have
step.
one last question for you, Mr. Martino. You said that the pond is dry during the summer. What about in the fall and the spring? Does it fill up?
There is water, and it's very, very shallow. And,
It seems like it's a vernal
pool.
So it sounds like it's become a vernal pool. It fills in the spring and the summer. and
Mosquitoes
then
are
dries.
horrible. You cannot, and my back porch is quite a distance from,
Do you
I think
hear,
it's about 100 feet away. You cannot eat in a back porch because of the mosquitoes. It's a horrendous area.
Do you hear frogs in the spring?
You do.
About this time?
We would have heard them last week. You hear them for about a week.
Right.
And it's over.
Because they're breeding, and it's a vernal pool, so they're breeding in that spot.
If it wasn't for the snow, we would have heard them quite a bit last week. It's quite a few
And
frogs.
that's pretty important habitat for amphibians, like Doreen had mentioned, and that's what I was trying to allude to too. That's amphibian habitat, spring, fall, really the spring filling up. That's important. So
I think we need to communicate.
Again, I put a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of remediation immediately. I'm just concerned about the cost, and also, don't forget, this is a hillside. So, there's going to be, obviously, it's harder to, grow things on the hillside. And it's more costs, and that's, I'm just concerned about that. And for what purpose? It looks good on paper, but at the end of the day.
The purpose here is not to beautify. The purpose is to increase the value of the wetlands as a wetland.
As a wetland, but if it's not wet.
But it is wet.
It actually.
But you don't need anything in the early spring, or,
Well, what
you have,
I think
We
what's
can
being
just go
offered.
out and meet and discuss.
Yeah, I think what's being offered to you is very generous, actually.
Okay, all right. No, I appreciate that. I thank you all for your help, and
Okay.
I look forward to
We have
working with.
good contact information.
So
I guess the
we're gonna
motion would be-
maintain the cease and correct until this inspection and effort of cooperation is undertaken. Let's everybody act with good faith. I think there's been good faith on Mr. Martino's part. I think has remediated and is trying to again, meet his obligations. And I recommend we remove the referral to the law department while this takes place.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I want to thank you all, and I want to wish you a good evening. Thank God there's
Thank you.
nobody behind me.
But we're not done yet.
We're not done, right? Okay. Cease and correct 2017-07 for Louis Jr. and Maria Goya?
Okay.
327 Riversville Road, unauthorized deposition of fill and removal of vegetation adjacent to wetland and watercourses. Doreen, please.
Okay, there was a large amount of fill that was deposited along an existing slope to create a berm at 325 Riversville Road. As a result, the overflow spilled onto the adjoining property at 327 Riversville Road. The wetland and watercourse area are located at the base of this slope on 327 Riversville Road and on the adjacent state-owned land. An application was submitted by the owner responsible at 325 Riversville Road in 2012, but ultimately it was denied for insufficient information. This past February, staff met with the attorney for the owner of 325 Riversville Road, and they've agreed to submit an application to correct the violation. However, since the violation also exists on 327 Riversville Road, a violation letter was sent to, and a cease and correct order was sent to the property owners at 327 Riversville Road. That property owner was here earlier this evening. He wanted to address the situation. He's been in contact with the attorney for the owner at 325 Riversville Road. They're going to be submitting an application for the April deadline. So we received his contact information, and he's working with us and the homeowner at 325 to rectify the violation. Staff has recommended that the cease and correct be maintained and a certificate of violation be filed on the land records if the application is not submitted by the deadline of April 24th.
Okay, thank you.
We're potentially putting a certificate of violation on the land record of 327 if an application doesn't come in from the owner of 325.
That's right.
Contingent.
The violation exists on his
But-
property, he's therefore responsible.
Yeah, I understand
Somebody
that,
else
but it's
caused it.
out of his control.
Yeah.
Then he would, I'm not suggesting this is a pleasant alternative, but then he would have to take civil action against his attorney for damaging his property.
Yeah, but do we want to be in a position of
Yeah.
putting a certificate of violation on this guy's land records because...
I think if it comes to the
And
point,
if we don't, then he doesn't have...
I don't think it's, in the long run, I don't know that that practice makes a whole, to some people it makes a difference, to others it don't. So if we don't do that, I don't have any problem. I think the issue is going to be, for us, enforcement is going to be with Mr. Mead.
We have
This
to-
property owner has said he's Mr. Mead can go ahead, make applications, fix this thing. So if this violation fails to proceed, our action is going to be against Mr. Mead, Mr. 325.
Mr. 325.
Yep.
Right.
So leave 327 out of it.
I don't mind.
But is the violations on 327?
It is, and it's important to do that as well if,
Why aren't we treating them separately? I still don't get it.
I'm sorry?
Why aren't we treating these as separate violations?
Because 325 violated 327. He filled onto his neighbor's property, substantially filled his neighbor's property.
Okay, so,
So we have to put the order on 327, even though that they were unknowing participants in this. We cannot require 325 to make application on somebody else's land.
right.
And if 327 says, you know what, 325 is an idiot, I don't want him touching my
Okay,
property.
so this is 327.
Right.
Right. And
But
thankfully,
the purpose is to
327,
create an impetus for 325
yes,
to resolve this.
yes.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. Motion to maintain cease and correct order 2017-07.
Second.
All in favor? We have one sort of. You don't have to support it, Bill.
You can,
You can
Gonna-
take that
No, but if-
certificate
let's say,
off.
for example, we put.
Are you abstaining? Or you saying no?
Let's say we put the cease and correct on 327 as well, and for reasons we don't know, they suddenly need to sell their property. We are encumbering their property.
Their property is encumbered with that certificate or not. The people that buy it are buying that violation.
Yeah,
At
that's
least
right.
now they're going to know it.
That's right, yeah.
yeah, I guess in the simplest analysis, 327 is in violation regardless of how it got that
Right.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, and
it's all about how.
and we
get
do not
325.
take a hard-nosed approach to these neighbors who get dragged in, but there's just certain legal things we've got to get in place, and we do our best to explain that to them. And we told the guy to go home at the beginning of the meeting, not now, so I think that was pretty nice, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I would suggest relative to this one, just as we voted to maintain the cease and correct, but hold off on the certificate of violation
That's
until
fine.
we know what happens with 325, because ultimately, we may want to force this guy to fix what he didn't create, but it's still a violation.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
Cease and correct order 2017-08 for Luis Morocho, 8 Sioux Place, unauthorized excavation, grading and filling, construction of stone walls, and failure to install erosion controls within wetland and watercourse areas. That's a good juicy one. Doreen, please.
All right, so we were alerted to a violation that was occurring on the property. It's at 8 Sioux Place. Behind the property, behind the residence, rather, workers were excavating earth and constructing, what appeared to be constructing stone walls along the property and along the garage that abuts the Byram River, so it's right up against the river. There were no sediment or erosion controls installed. The owner did receive a permit from the building department, but staff contacted the building department staff, and they confirmed that they did get a permit, but the homeowners kind of exceeded what they represented in their application. So currently, the building permit is on hold due to issues with both the highway department and the wetlands agency. So a stop work order was issued on March 6th by regular and certified mail with a deadline for the submission of an application by April 18th. And the cease and correct order was also issued by certified and regular mail on March 20th. Staff's recommending that the agency maintain the cease and correct order and place a certificate of violation on the land record if the application to correct the violation isn't received by April 18th.
Second.
Okay, motion on the bonds.
Motion to release bonds?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.